So, good afternoon. Here I am. You'll never guess where I pop up. And here I am in one of the most beautiful parts of Ayrshire in Scotland at the start of the summer in 2023. And I'm sitting with my friend, the very well known artist Michael Clark, in his wonderful, eclectic, colourful, a bit like you, Mike, colourful studio. So it's an very different way sitting in a couple of aircraft seats to talk to the one and only Michael Clark, PAI, RSW, RGI, one of the most qualified artists I have. And we're sitting on a couple of aircraft seats. So I'm wanting, Mike, to talk to you initially about you graduated from Edinburgh School of Art in 1983, but you've had a colourful life as much as the colourful studio here from an early age. And tell us a little bit about schooling and thereafter.
Well, there were two things I loved at school, David. And one was art or painting, and the second thing I loved was playing golf. Now, they don't really go that well together. I mean, one is almost sport. And I played and played and played. I was obsessed with it. And I got to an age when I thought I want to make this my life. So at 17, I had to really make a decision. I mean, I was falling out with people at school. You're either playing golf or you're coming to school. And I said, I want to turn professional. So I was attached to Old Prestwick Golf Club as an assistant golf professional for nearly 2 years. And I started the whole training program where you teach, you learn how to repair clubs, you work with members. And I think I would have eventually become a club professional. But then one day I suddenly thought, this isn't enough for me. I remember having a conversation in the shop and I thought, I want more out of life. Golf isn't actually going to be enough. People now, they can't believe it. They think, how wonderful. And I said, well, no, I'd hit a point where I really didn't want to play anymore. I really
What
wanted
were you,
to stop.
17, 18?
By then I would be, 18, nearly 19. I really got to the point where I thought, no. So I gave away all my clothes to the Salvation Army. And I stopped playing and I spent a year building a portfolio and went to art school. I didn't play again for 5 years.
So the golfing we'll come back to, because some of your most famous paintings, I suppose, are why you're one of the reasons of your success. You've often painted golfers, which I think these golfing painters remind you of your uncles, your relations and people like that on the golf course. And you were very, very lucky, and you must feel terribly blessed, because as a young boy, you had a talent for art and golf.
Yes, I mean, you would have to say, to be able to make a living from two things that you love, you have to count yourself as being very lucky. But it can be a very lonely place. I mean, I see the young pros around where I play now, and I mean, I play for fun now, which is really the best thing in the world. And I know they're suffering because it's the worst place in the world. I mean, if you're not making any money, you're not making good scores, you really don't want to be playing golf. So I'm very lucky now that, it can become a subject, but I can relax on a golf course when I couldn't anymore when I was playing.
So you then opted to go to art school in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Was that an enjoyable experience?
It was, except round about quite early on, I suddenly thought, what have I done? I thought, I'm actually missing playing golf. What am I doing? Anyway, very quickly, I contacted a golf pro in Ayrshire, and I said what had happened, and he said, well, don't do anything right now, but come down, we'll spend a day. We talked for a day, and he said, look, there's a job if you want a job. If you want to come back to golf, it's there. If you don't, stick with art school. Take a week to think about it. And I phoned him a week later and I said, I'm going to stay at art school.
So you graduated in 1983. And if I've got this right, did you go to London in maybe 1996?
No, I went to London 89. So I went 83, I graduated 83 from Edinburgh. I then immediately fell into the BBC in Glasgow. So I commuted to Glasgow, then I moved to Glasgow. So I was nearly 6 years in the BBC in Glasgow.
And what were you doing then?
In graphic design, in the design department.
So I think one of the reasons about the Meet the Artist series, people who are maybe painters, they're part-time painters, they're hobby painters, if you like, and they're fascinated about how somebody becomes a professional artist. So Mike has been round the block at a relatively early age before becoming a full-time painter. Just before we forget, Mike, why are we sitting in a couple of aircraft seats in your studio?
Because they're really comfortable.
Well, you can call, if I can call
All right.
you Victor, you can call me
Oh,
Jack.
thank you.
Because
Yes,
I feel as if we're on a flight to Benidorm,
All
and
right.
I'm waiting for
Well, I was hoping
I'm
it
waiting for a
was.
box of
Oh,
Pringles
well,
to
I was
arrive.
hoping it was somewhere a little bit more like France.
Oh yes, yes, of course. Because
France
we all
would
know
be. Well, I'm back from Bordeaux last month. I mean, Bordeaux would be. If you haven't been, it's a
you're back from Bordeaux. I've been in
beautiful.
Largs earlier.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay. But
so why are we in these seats?
well, do you not think they're awfully comfortable?
They are actually, especially for our age group with
Well,
bad
I
backs.
think that's also true. Now, I do often sit and I look at the work. I mean, most artists, you know, you don't just stand and paint all day. You sit back and you have a look and you think, is that working? Is that what I want? And so they're very comfortable. They were a present from my father-in-law.
What a great gift. I want to skip before we start. We're going to talk about the paintings. This is an incredible studio to work in, and there's lots of you're an emotional guy. You rip things up, you start again. If you're not totally happy, they get chucked out the window, probably in a tantrum. You have bottles of wine arriving here, and it's not because he drinks much, it's because Mike's paintings of we've just sold one of your paintings, actually. What's it called again? The Bordeaux.
The big Bordeaux
The
painting.
big Bordeaux painting, which Tom might be able to drop in here. That's why Mike's got lots of wine bottles. It's not because he sits here with a bit of brie knocking back wine at 11 in the morning. But tell us how, Mike, it then jumped to, I think that's maybe where I remember reading your biography. In 96, you had your first solo show in Knightsbridge.
That's right. Well, so 89, I was in the BBC and I could have stayed there for the next 30 years. I mean, people were slightly astonished. I was taken into the office and said, well, why on earth do you want to move? You know, the sensible thing was to take a job with the BBC in London, but I said, no, I'm going to just do something completely different. So I moved to London. I always felt I should live in London at some point. I mean, Glasgow felt very small. And I moved to London in 89 and had to art direct, had to find a way of making money. So I was doing some illustration, I was doing some art directing for a magazine, a golf magazine, funny enough, and some textile designs. And I gradually got back to easel painting. But it wasn't until 1996, Sally Hunter, Fine Art, offered me a solo.
Incredible, because you know, you've not started it in a local gallery in Prestwick. You've gone straight for your first show in a highly regarded gallery in Knightsbridge.
It was probably luck. She'd had a cancellation, and she said,
very self-deprecating.
she said, "There's
it was probably luck.
There's a space."
I can assure you, it doesn't happen because of luck.
I think her husband, was a Lloyd's name, and he'd just gone down. So they were really keen to make some
and
sales.
listen, he's the most self-deprecating here. Listen, I've got a funny feeling that this flight's going to land in Benidorm. I think we're going to check out before it gets bumpy. And I want just to stop for a second here, and then we'll get out of the seats to show you some paintings. So we've landed. Here we are. We're not in Benidorm. That's a joke. We're in the most gorgeous part of Ayrshire. What I wanted to jump to, where we've been talking about the years going through, Mike, about your life, and we're jumping now to around the millennium as we talk about, and you returned north. That was a lot to do with the family, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, we loved being in London. My client base was pretty much London. We could nip over to France. It was very easy. But the truth was, we had a third child and we really couldn't. I was renting a studio space. We just had no room.
So you were, by this time, a full-time painter.
Yes.
The world was your oyster. And what I want to talk about is, you know, your paintings now. And I want to get the connection, I think, about your story with the paintings, which I think is important. You know, your connection with France, your connection with golf, which we've spoken about, your connection with the little black dress. And all of these stories which are synonymous with yourself. Tell that story then.
Okay, the French one's easy. I mean, I first went to France as an art student, so that would be 1980. And it was, to me, it just seemed perfect. I mean, it was Paris. I mean, we were all very interested in film, painting, whatever. It was just that, it seemed to be a sort of perfect place to me to live. You know, you could, smell freshly baked baguettes, cigarettes or on the street, whatever. I loved the buildings. I mean, I've never really needed great landscapes. I loved the buildings. I loved the whole sort of iconography of it. So we then started to holiday in France once we had children. And from London, it was very easy. We could nip over to Normandy or even a bit further. But it was when I came back and I was actually doing a one-day teaching course for some people in the Botanical Gardens. And I always throw this into conversation because usually they'll say, well, what are you doing for the summer? And I usually say, well, I usually try and rent a house. And she said, well, we've just finished a spare house in France, why don't you come out there? So it was in this tiny village here, which is Montjoie in southwest France.
That's not far from Toulouse, is it?
That's yes, you're right. It's about an hour and a bit from Toulouse. About 2 hours or so.
How come, Michael Clark, nobody's ever said to me, we've got a spare house if you'd like to use it? It's never happened.
Never happened to you?
Not even in Stonehaven.
It's not happened to me, actually. Usually I've had to pay.
But
I have rented them.
Sorry. No, tell me about this painting then.
Well, so this, we were renting just about here, and this is the mayor's office, which is important in France. It's where, if you get married, you have to, all the paperwork's done in advance. In fact, they get married actually in the little office. But I hadn't really picked up on this because I was at Edinburgh Art School, Edinburgh College of Art. David Donaldson, who was head of painting at Glasgow School of Art at the same time, had a studio in this same.
Did he really? We have so many artists. Glenn Schooler talked about David Donaldson. So many people, and I think there's you all know David Donaldson Jr., don't you?
Yes, in fact, David Donaldson Jr. was here. So I rented our house from David Donaldson Jr. So it was a bit strange because I walked in and I thought, it's strange. I wonder why this name rings a bell. And then it all, so I have used it as a subject matter.
Can we go back a little bit, Mike? I know the golfing. You've got good and bad memories of your golfing days, and these two paintings here are not finished. But I wanted Mike to talk about the wonderful way he's got yellows and greens, and this is a painting of a cyclist halfway through, which I think has got memories of France, hasn't it?
Yes.
Talk about both of these paintings, could you?
The top painting is it's on the River Seine, so it's where all the booksellers are. But it was a lovely. I mean, I do quite like moody lights. It doesn't always have to be bright blue. So this was a very gentle, moody light. As you often do get in Paris. So she'll be painted in a bit more. She's just charcoaled in, but you can get a feel for, as I say, just a moody left bank painting. Now the golfers, again, there's a lot of green on a golf course. So sometimes you're trying to just find a way of introducing something else. The two palettes rather are very similar. And I'm trying to do something that's not a caricature of a golfer, but I don't want to spell it all out. So in this one, I'm trying to actually get a little hint of movement, which is quite difficult without becoming a bit too cliched. So it'll happen, but it's not quite there.
And explain the background.
Well, this painting, I started buying old golf bags and props in a local auction house, and I do like old golf clubs. I mean, I used to collect old golf clubs. So the old leather bag, I mean, now everything's become very sort of plasticky, so I just liked it. And in fact, when I got it home, it still had this old gentleman's membership card of a local golf course. To me, it's just a subject, that I feel comfortable with. It took a long time. I probably wouldn't have painted this at art school, strangely. It would have been too close to me. It's taken quite a while. So I can now look at it with a sort of romance rather than maybe the opposite.
Do you know, Mike, I've not played golf since I was about 14. And up at Hazelhead, growing up in Aberdeen, I went with some pals to try it, and I was no use. And but you know, the interesting thing I find that, and there's no great secret, Mike. In my own home, I've got numerous of your paintings because I love them. I've heard well-known artists comment that your simplicity in the painting is actually so clever that very few artists manage to achieve. And I've got a painting of a golfer, and I would have that. I think it's a beautiful painting. Jumping also, Mike, you know, you've talked about your fond memories of Paris. You've got some wonderful paintings of bottles of wine we've talked about, and one of them will drop in that people can have a look at. But I want to go back to your love of boutiques and how I was actually talking to a lawyer from Edinburgh the other day, and she said, I'm dying to own, this is absolutely true, I'm dying to own a Michael Clark LBD, the little black dress painting. And this is a very classy, elegant lady, and she'll definitely end up with one of them. You've just finished a big painting for me for the enduring appeal of the little black dress.
Yes.
Carry on why you regularly paint little black dresses.
Well, you know, because people used to ask me, you know, I mean, well, the first thing is I don't wear them. I mean, I don't go home and put them on.
We wouldn't hold it against
No.
you, honestly.
But the reason it happened when Karen was having our children, and if, you know, when you're with young children, you're often walking about with sick down the back of your back. So every Christmas I used to buy her a black dress, and eventually it got to the point she had she had too many really. So one year I decided to paint one instead. So she got a painting of a little black dress. But then I was in Paris and I saw one in the window, and I just kept going. But they are iconic. I mean, and in fact, there's an exhibition coming up in the Museum of Scotland this year, which actually looks, you know, why is this? It's an iconic. I mean, you can tweak the shape, but it works. And to me, it's romantic. You know, it can say lots of things.
I suppose Mary Quant died earlier on this year, and
Mary Quant, yes.
That's you know, when you look at some of your paintings of shops, there's one I'm seeing at the corner of my eye, and all of that. They almost don't date. So I want to round up. This has been terrific, you know, to be in a proper, busy working studio. Tom will zoom in. There are things lying everywhere in here. There's canvases, because I've said before, Mike, he's a bit like Keith Floyd was to cooking. He'll throw things around, they'll get there, they'll be ripped up, because they've got to be perfect. You are a bit of a perfectionist. What I'm curious about, because we're of an age, you've had a big birthday recently, and what's your plans for the future?
Well, I'm going to keep going. I mean, I think we said it on. I feel very lucky that I can paint for a living. An ideal trip for me would probably be a longer period in France. I mean, it tends to be short trips. If I could have a longer period where I would have a studio maybe there and try and complete some of the work actually in France. I've tended to come back, and the real work's been done here. I mean, the studio is where virtually everything is finished. I don't do much in France. There isn't enough time. You know, bringing back wet oils isn't practical.
So spending more time. Remember, you had it was snapped up like this. Mike painted a painting of, was it Alicia's garden or something?
It was Lydia.
Lydia's garden.
Lydia's garden.
And it'll maybe drop in. And Lydia's garden, I remember you told me the story about it. I won't get you to repeat that now. But one of my regular clients just said, oh, no question, I have to have that. And maybe that's what more memories being built here, maybe more time in your garden in Alloway, and then bringing it all to the canvas.
That sounds a great plan.
Does it?
Mm.
So, Michael Clark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom's waving at you here. Thank you very much for allowing us into your studio. I know it doesn't happen very often, and I hope everybody's enjoyed this Meet the Artist.
Thank you.